Hello, everyone. The chat option is now open, so please tell us from which location you're joining us. We enjoy meeting new people and hearing from longtime friends. Welcome to the March 10th, 2022 American Ethical Union and Freethought Society Zoom featuring actor and social activist Chetan Ahimsa. My name is Margaret Downey. I'm the founder and president of the Freethought Society. I met Chetan's father, Amar, several years ago at a Roanoke, Virginia event, and I met his mother, Mangala, shortly thereafter, and we became fast friends. Amar and Mangala connected me to their famous son, and here we are today introducing him to all of you via Zoom. I'm sure he'll find many like-minded friends here today. So thanks for logging on early, everyone. As our pre-event entertainment, we will be presenting a collection of film trailers in which Chetan has appeared. We are screen sharing a photo collection. Oh, hold on a second. Okay, so we are sharing the screen so that you can easily identify Chetan and the montage of the films that we'll be showing. Jake Ritter from the American Ethical Union put the film trailer collection together, and you'll be seeing that in a minute. Thank you so much, Jake. We thought that showing a film trailer collection would be a great way for audience members to appreciate Chetan's multiple talents. Chetan will be talking about his social activism work and much, much more. But for now, we wanted everyone to know about his accomplishments in the film industry. Chetan is not only a fine actor, he dances, sings, and even does his own stunts. His handsome looks and charming personality have made him a romance idol and a superstar in India. We hope you enjoy this collection of film trailers.
ಸಂಬಳ ಎಷ್ಟು ತಗೊಂತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಏನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ.
ನೀವೇನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಾ?
BBC ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್.
ಲೈಟ್ ಆಗಿ ನಿನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದ ಲೇ ಮುದ್ರಕೊಳಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಎಲೆ ಮೇಲಿರೋ ಅಪ್ಪ ಅಲ್ಲ ಕಣಲೇ, ನುಗ್ಗಿ ಹುಡುಕಿ ಹೊಡಿತೀನಿ.
ಮದುವೆ ಆಗಿ ಮಕ್ಕಳಾಗಿ ನಾಮಕರಣಕ್ಕೂ ಕರೀಲ್ವಲ್ಲ.
ನನಗೆ ಮದ್ವೆನೇ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಕಣ್ರಿ. ಹೆಲ್ಮಿ ಅದಿತಿ
ಪ್ರೈವೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು, ಸಿಗ್ತೀಯಾ?
ಸುಮ್ನೆ ಹೀಗೆ ತಲೆ ಕೆಡಿಸೋ ಹಾಗೆ ನಗಬೇಡ ನೀನು ಹೋಗೆ.
ಯಾಕೆ ಸರ್ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ?
ಬ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಮೋಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಲೋನ್ ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
ಫೇಕ್ ಸರ್ಟಿಫಿಕೇಟ್ ಬಳಸಿ ಕೆಲವು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಗಳು ಸರ್ಕಾರಿ ಹಾಗೂ ಖಾಸಗಿ ಕಂಪನಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿರುವುದು ಮಾಹಿತಿ ದೊರೆತಿದೆ.
ಕಾಮನ್ ಮ್ಯಾನ್ ತರ ಕೂತ್ಕೋಬೇಡ, ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಸಾಥ್ ಕೊಡೋ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್ ತರ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ. ಅವನಿಗೆ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಎವಿಡೆನ್ಸ್. ಅವನು ನಿನ್ನ ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದೇ ಬರ್ತಾನೆ.
ಅವ್ರು ಯಾರು, ಏನ್ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಯಾವುದು ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಇರ್ಲಿ, ಅವರೇ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಹುಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ.
ನನ್ನ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ತುಂಬಾ ದೊಡ್ಡದು.
ಅವ್ನು ಇಡೀ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ನೇ ಛಿದ್ರ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ. ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಭಾಷೆ, ಜ್ಞಾನ ಅಲ್ಲ. ಆದರೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಒಂದು ಇತಿಹಾಸ. ಕನ್ನಡನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಸಿ, ಗೌರವಿಸಿ.
ಪಿಸು ಮಾತಿಗೆ ಅಧರ ತುಸು ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ನೋಡಿದರೆ ಮಿತಿ ಮೀರುತ್ತಿದೆ ಮನಮೋಹಕ ಮಿಡಿತ ಆಳದಲ್ಲಿ ಅತಿಯಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ ಅಪರೂಪದ ಸೆಳೆತ ನಿನ್ನದೇ ಹೆಸರಿದೆ ಕನಸಿನ ಊರಿಗೆ ಕುಣಿಯತ ಬಂದೆನು ಭಿನ್ನವಾದ ನಿನ್ನ ಧಾಟಿಗೆ ಓ ಸೋತೆ ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಮಧುರ ಪಿಸು ಮಾತಿಗೆ ಅಧರ ತುಸು ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಇರುವಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ಇರಲಾರದೆ ಬರುವಲ್ಲಿಯೂ ಬರಲಾರದೆ ಸೋತೆ ನಾನು ನಿನ್ನ ಪ್ರೀತಿಗೆ ಓ ಚೂರಾದೆ ಒಂದೇ ಭೇಟಿಗೆ
ಈ ಸಿನಿಮಾ ಕಾಲ್ಪನಿಕ ಸೃಷ್ಟಿಯಲ್ಲ.
ನಾನ್ ಜೈಲಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾಗ ಬೇರೆ ಈಗ ಬೇರೆ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ನಮ್ದು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯೋ ದಂಡ ದುಡ್ಡು ಎಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ಕೈಗೆ ಬರ್ಬೇಕು. ಹಂಗಂತ ಕುಮಾರಿಂಗ್ ಹೇಳೋದು.
ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಅವಂದಂತ ಯಾರ್ದು ಅಂತ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ.
ಇವತ್ತು ಜೈರಾಜ್ ಕತೆ ಅಂತೂ ಮುಗಿಯುತ್ತೆ. ಜೈರಾಜನ್ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲನ್ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿ ಎನ್ಕೌಂಟ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಪರದಾಗ್ತೀವಿ. ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಟೋಟಲಿ ಸೇಫ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಡುತ್ತೆ.
ಓ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್, ನಿನ್ನ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರ್ನ ನೀನೇ ಇಟ್ಕೋ, ನನಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾ ಸರ್.
ಆ ದಿನಗಳು ಪ್ರತಿ ಕ್ಷಣ ಹೃದಯದೊಳಗೆ ಹಸಿರಾಗಿದೆ, ಅದು ಇದೆ ನನ್ನ ಬಿಡದೆ.
ನಾವು ಯಾರ ವಿಷಯಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಒಂಥರ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಇದ್ದಂಗೆ.
ಇಂದಿರಾ ಗಾಂಧಿಯವರು ಚಿಕ್ಕಮಗಳೂರಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲೆಕ್ಷನ್ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಕೂರಿಸಿ ಜನನೇ ಈ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಬಂದು ನನ್ನ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂರಿಸು.
ಜೈರಾಜ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಫರ್ನ ರಿಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಕೊತ್ವಾಲನ ಊರು ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ ಬೆಂಕಿ ಆಗಿದ್ದಾನೆ.
ಈ ಫೈಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಚಾನ್ಸ್ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ಗೊಂದು ಗತಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೇಕು.
1000 ಕೊತ್ವಾಲ್ಗಳು ಬಂದರೂ ನನ್ನನ್ನು ಹೆದರಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾ.
ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ಯಾರೇನೋ?
ನೀವೇ ಇದ್ರು ಇದೇ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರಿ ಸರ್.
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, आज मध्य रात्रि 12 बजे से 500 रुपए और 1000 रुपए के करेंसी नोट लीगल टेंडर नहीं रहेंगे.
ಊರಾಚೆ ಲಾಟ್ ಗಟ್ಲೆ ದುಡ್ಡನ್ನ ಸುಟ್ಟಾಕಿದಾರಂತೆ.
ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಮನಿ ಇರಬೇಕು.
ಬರಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋ ಅಷ್ಟು ದುಡ್ಡು ಥ್ರೂ RBI ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಟು ಹೈದರಾಬಾದ್ ಬೈ ರೋಡೇ ಬರಬೇಕು, ರೈಟ್?
ಹುಚ್ಚು ನನ್ನ ಮಗನೇ, 100 ಕೋಟಿ ಕಣೋ.
100 ಕೋಟಿನಾ?
Welcome to the Freethought Society and American Ethical Union special event featuring actor and social activist Chetan Ahimsa. I hope those of you who logged on early enjoyed the film highlights. If you missed it, you can find a recording of the entire program on the Freethought Society and American Ethical Union YouTube channels in the next few weeks. My name is Jake Ritter, and I am the Program Support and Communications Coordinator at American Ethical Union. It is my pleasure to be the Zoom coordinator and your co-host for today's event. Before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping items to convey. This session is being recorded for replay on social media. By joining the session, you consent to be recorded and agree to abide by the Freethought Society's anti-harassment and code of conduct policy, both of which can be found on the Freethought Society website. For the best viewing, we recommend that you put your Zoom settings on speaker view. That way, you will see the speakers in the best and biggest Zoom box possible. Everyone except the hosts, the speaker, and myself will be muted. Please write your questions down to share when the floor is open for discussions. Your microphone will be unmuted during the discussion time, and we will spotlight you when you speak. If you prefer not to be spotlighted or speak, another option for you is to send me your questions through the Zoom chat. I will ask questions or make comments you send to me on your behalf. Just type "please ask" or "please say," and I'll happily represent you by repeating your question or commentary if you'd like me to. On behalf of everyone at the American Ethical Union, welcome to tonight's event. For those of you not familiar with us, the American Ethical Union is a federation of ethical societies whose mission is to create, nurture, and inspire ethical humanist communities and foster a world that is democratic, compassionate, just, and sustainable. Ethical culture is a humanist movement whose members focus energies on building ethical relationships with each other and the world at large. As a non-theistic organization, the American Ethical Union is guided by our aspiration to build and sustain a culture that helps each person's worth and dignity be realized and appreciated. The American Ethical Union looks to engage the broader public to bring positive social change and address the issues affecting us on a local and global scale. If you are interested in being a part of our effort to be the change you want to see in the world, you can join the American Ethical Union as an individual member. You will find a link to joining the American Ethical Union in the chat. You can also stay up to date with what the American Ethical Union is doing by joining our mailing list or visiting our website, aeu.org. I'm also putting my email in the chat so you can reach me directly. And now, Margaret Downey will tell you about the Freethought Society. Margaret?
Thank you, Jake. Welcome, everyone. We are so pleased to be co-hosting the event with the American Ethical Union. Our groups are similar in so many ways. The Freethought Society serves as a local forum in which freethinkers can meet, socialize, and exchange ideas. The mind of a freethinker is not restrained by superstitions or prescribed dogmas that tell us what we can and cannot think. While some today would suppress independent thought, freethinkers know that the unrestricted exchange of ideas have been the primary forces of progress in all civilizations. As freethinkers, we want to better ourselves and our community through the unrestrained application of reason and human endeavor to address the local and global problems that confront us. The Freethought Society offers many volunteer opportunities, and we hope one of our committees will be of interest to you. You can find a list of our committees on the Freethought Society website and on the back page of our complimentary e-zine. If you would like to receive an e-zine publication notice, please provide me with your email address through a personal message in the chat or contact me at my email address. It is margaret@ftsociety.org. The Freethought Society and the American Ethical Union are nonprofit educational organizations. Therefore, we hope you will be moved to make a donation today. A donation link from the American Ethical Union and the Freethought Society will appear in the chat section a few times during this event. Now, Jake and I will introduce our guest speaker, Chetan Ahimsa.
Chetan Ahimsa is an actor from Karnataka, India. He is also a political and social activist. Chetan made his on-screen debut in the 2007 cult classic film Dinagalu and was awarded Best Actor in the Udaya Film Awards for the film. He received more critical acclaim for his role in the 2009 film Birugali. Following Birugali, Chetan starred in the 2010 and 2013 dramas Suryankanti and Maina, respectively. His upcoming project, action thriller 100 Chorus, comes out later this year. His film career is vast, but of special mention is the 2017 film Athirata. In that film, Chetan received very positive reviews, but the film failed at the box office when right-wing extremists tore down posters and tried to prevent the film from being screened due to Chetan's political stances. An online campaign organized by Hindu fundamentalists boycotted Athirata, citing Chetan's efforts against the caste system in India. Just a few weeks ago, Chetan was arrested for tweeting remarks that the police deemed controversial in defense of a female rape victim. We are so relieved he was released from prison in time for this event. He will be telling us more about that, I'm sure. Chetan will not stop and continues to take acting roles, despite being threatened and even arrested for making what some in India call offensive remarks. Chetan also continues to fight for art, equality, justice, rationality, and nonviolence. Today he will tell us what motivates him to be an activist.
Chetan credits his mother, Mangala Kumar, and his father, Amar Kumar, for providing him with the willpower to continue his important activism work. And I am delighted to call Mangala and Amar dear friends. I'm privileged to see them often. They reside in Roanoke, Virginia, where my son lives and where my grandson attends college. Mangala and Amar are both retired doctors, but they own and operate a school in India. The school provides much needed secular education, and they are very proud of the young minds they have helped develop. Chetan was born in Chicago, Illinois. The family made sure that Chetan and his brother did not forget their India connections. The Kannada language was often spoken in their home. As a young adult, Chetan studied the writings of Erode Ramaswamy. Revered as Periyar, Ramaswamy was an Indian social activist and politician who started the self-respect movement. Periyar is known as the father of Dravidian, a social movement that advocates to eradicate the ills of the existing caste system, including untouchability. Chetan will now talk about his personal activism, Periyar's importance in India's rational thinking movement, and the influence Periyar had on his own life goals. Welcome, Chetan.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about Periyar's legacy and interact with so many thoughtful people, many oceans across the world, many oceans over. I want to thank Margaret Downey and the Freethought Society, as well as Jake Ritter, who made the trailer mix, and Hugh Taft Morales of American Ethical Union for giving me this opportunity to talk about Periyarism in the South Asian as well as global context. And I'm interested. I want to express his thoughts, his movements, his fights for justice, and then maybe open it up for questions. And this, a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about, it's from my own personal research, discussion with a lot of intellectuals, as well as this particular book, which is A Man Ahead of His Time by Balaji Kumar. This is Periyar right here. Extraordinary thinker. Periyar, along with his friend Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who is a Dalit born. Periyar is actually Shudra born. I'll explain these things. These are the two most extraordinary Indians of the 20th century, equality driven, radical feminists, radical humanitarians, rational thinkers. And Periyar's movement and his political, as cultural nationalism is equality driven politics, and is also his political legacy is still existent today. And Ambedkar and Periyar are unquestionably the ideological role models today. Gandhi is, I don't even want to say a far 30s, way down the line. So Periyar, and I'm happy to be talking about Periyar, but if we want to understand Periyar, we have to understand what is caste and the caste system, which Margaret talks about, and untouchability, because Periyar, these socio-cultural religious foundations are dismantled by Periyar on so many levels. In the region of Tamil Nadu, which is in the southern part, which is an adjacent state to Karnataka, where I reside. These are many, many countries in themselves. Karnataka has about 6.5 crores, which is like about 65 million people, the size of France, the size of Italy. Tamil Nadu is also equally, if not around the same size, if not bigger. So there's quite a bit of so there's a lot of people, and they're nations of themselves, but they're within the union construct of India. But if you want to understand caste, which exists on every single level, political, food habits, housing situation, who you vote for, access to water, access to education, access to resources, access to any kind of life existence, caste, everything is riddled by caste in India. And caste is a very hierarchical system. So let me explain this, like how this boils down is about, we all know about in India, there's been multiple kind of migrations. And 75,000 years ago is the original migration, which we call Adivasis, who are the tribal community. But the most controversial migration was the post-Harappa Mohenjo-daro, which you might have heard of, the Indus Valley civilization. Post that, about 3,500 years ago, there was this Aryan migration. Margaret mentioned Dravidian, but Aryan migration is very contested because it challenges the whole existence of you can say Hinduism, but you call it Brahmanism, the system of inequality that Periyar and so many other rational thinkers question. Because what happens 3,500 years ago is Max Muller, who's a German philosopher, comes up with the Aryan invasion theory. A lot of people on horses, white-skinned people on horses, come and start attacking brown-skinned people, which is debunked now. It's an Aryan migration theory, which is essentially Central Asian fire worshippers, maybe about 3,500 years ago, who are like pastoral communities, migrate to India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, this region of the world, all South Asia, and they bring with they mate with the normal people and they become a part of the society here. But what they bring with them is essentially Sanskrit, Vedas, cow worship, and the caste system, which is the scriptural and to the scriptural basis that is Hinduism. I will use the word Brahmanism today, which essentially means the same thing. But this is a system of inequality and birth-based inequality, superiority and inferiority that is in the caste system. Caste system has gone through many cycles of rigidity and fluidity. But the word caste actually comes from the Portuguese term, which means race, lineage, or breed. And caste, actually casta, and Portuguese had a very strong role in India, even for 500 years, which is 100 years even before the British came in. So what the caste system is, to explain it to you, is that there are Varna and Jati. Varna is essentially a four-pronged pyramidal division. And it is based on Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya at the top. Brahmin is the priestly class with a very small percentage of men who have access to education, which is Sanskrit education, access to all status and privileges, access to God and religion. And they are the ones who are the superior, most superior. And then you talk about Kshatriya, who are the nobility, and they are the ruling classes. And then you have the Vaishya, who are the business to mercantile. These are the upper caste, and these are the men, because the women don't have access to education. We don't have access to the religious privileges. These men do. Now, by and large, the largest group of people in this are the Shudras. And the Shudras are essentially artisans, working class people working with their hands, the farmers, the people who iron your clothes, the people who make the pots, these are the Shudra communities, who are the working class communities, who are the bottom of the pillar. But now, who are actually extremely discriminated against are the Panchamas. And the Panchamas are the fifth category, which are the Dalits, or the untouchables, which Margaret talks about. And the untouchables are the ones that do the most work that nobody likes when it comes to like carrying human excreta on their head, when it comes to taking care of animal skins, when it comes to anything that is looked at as inhuman. And actually in the Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, which is a aspect of Vedanta. What it says is like, if you do good work, which means if you actually help the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya men, who are the upper caste, who make up about 15% divided by 2, which is about 7.5%, because men and women, so you're talking about 7%, then you will be born into, in the next life, a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya womb. If you do bad work, if you do sin, whatever, which means questioning that power structure, then you will be born into a pig, a dog, or a chandala, which is another word from untouchable. So this dehumanization is completely built into this 3.5-year-old scriptural basis. Now, and this hierarchical system continues to exist in every region of the nation, to different levels and in different names. And this is endogamous. In other words, they all marry within themselves. Why is this caste system so rigid and so difficult to break? You have to understand is that besides the poles, everybody in between, like you're talking about 90 or 85% people, are both oppressors and the oppressed. They're being oppressed from the people who are above them, but they are doing the oppression to the people who are below them in that scale, caste scale. So that retains the power structure, because very few, except the people on the bottom level, who are the untouchables, want to fight this system and want to remove the system and want to annihilate caste, which was a very important aspect of Periyar's movement. And also you have to understand that this is basically religiously mandated. This religiously mandate is based on kind of the past sins makes you an untouchable, the past good deeds makes you reborn as a dominant caste. So there's this internalization, there's no vested interest to take that out, because it's like, hey, I'm here because I've done good, or hey, there's almost a kind of feeling of like, I'm destined to be an untouchable. Well, untouchable means not being able to like, for hundreds of during Periyar's time, no, your shadow should not come out in the daytime in front of like other dominant caste, privileged caste. Your saliva is clearly, you have to wear a pen that you cannot, if you saliva, you have to sweep when you go ahead, when you walk the streets. I mean, there's so much dehumanization that is clearly, even today, even though in 1947, it was banned in 1950 when India came, even today, the caste system is so replete. Dalits don't have access to water in Karnataka. Dalits don't have access to a lot of education. They're all first generation education now. Their parents are landless. Their parents are, even today, if a Dalit kid goes into a temple, in many ways, there'll be uproar, there's fines. And the most heinous is like, even to this day, if a Dalit boy consensually goes like absconds with a dominant caste girl, then what happens is, not only is there honor killings, not only is there, the family comes, or the powerful communities come and attack, but many times, even to this day, the daughters and the sisters, the wives, not wife, but the mother and the sister of the boy run away, pays a very deep price in that village area. And these kind of realities are still so stark, and only 5% of Indian society is intercaste or interreligion, which means 95% marry within their caste, which continues this caste system. So Periyar, which is extraordinary, Periyar dismantles this system in Tamil Nadu today. Tamil Nadu is the most anti-caste state in the nation. Tamil Nadu is the most equality-driven and rationalist leaders in the nation, progressive thinking. And that is all because of Tamil Nadu, Periyar, who actually for 93 years builds this extraordinary inclusive coalition movement that rattles the power structure in Delhi, which is thousands of kilometers away, that he through mass mobilization and street fighting. So I did briefly mention about how India is built into an European Union style. It's a European Union is obviously, EU is almost like Europe is a continent, but India as a nation is essentially each region, linguistic states. 28 states are almost the linguistic states is the union construct of India, and about 22 we have official languages. And Periyar's language that he fights in is called Tamil, which is even older than Sanskrit, which is a spoken language, which is a Dravidian fight, because Sanskrit, as I mentioned, is the Aryan fight, and Dravidian fight is Tamil and my mother tongue, Kannada, which is also Periyar's mother tongue. So interestingly, even though he's a Kannada mother tongue, he fights in Tamil. So this Dravidian movement is a linguistic battle between the dominant Aryan North Indian upper caste, privileged, access to power, resources, and God, and redemption, versus the Dravidian, who is more of the subaltern, marginalized, deprived communities in terms of education and dignity. Essentially, Periyar's fight is a fight to reclaim human dignity. It's just like we are also human beings to the same level. And that fight is extraordinary. And today, other leaders in Karnataka, other extraordinary people are oftentimes put into are encompassed by the Brahmanistic system. If you look at the Judeo-Christian Islamic religion, there's a kind of exclusivist kind of attitude, because they have, there's a book, there's a prophet who starts a religion, there's some kind of definitive step. But Brahmanism, and if you want to call it Hinduism, or you call it Brahmanism, essentially, which places the caste, this hierarchical birthplace, superiority, inferiority, is actually so encompassing that all the people who fought against that, to many people from Gautama Buddha, I know you know Buddha, who's an extraordinary human being, who is more than a spiritual kind of human being in many ways, is a revolutionary thinker in terms of fighting. And he and other people like Ambedkar, they become completely hijacked within the Brahminical system, and they become extensions of Brahmanism. But why Periyar, and when I bring it to Karnataka, is that I think is so necessary, is that when I talk about Periyar, there's vitriol, there's hate spewed, there's people say bad words. And when they say that, it's evident that Periyar's ideas are still alive, that Periyar's revolution has not been hijacked by the powers to be, by the religious, cultural, spiritual powers that control and dominate the media discourse, the political discourse, all discourses of the Indian subcontinent today. And that's why it's so essential. So Periyar was born on September 17th, 1879. Why that date, September 17th, is interesting, is it's the birthday of Prime Minister Narendra Modi too. So what makes it interesting is this year, I saw in 2021, Periyar's birthday was radically appreciated and was all across the nation. And Modi's is clearly going down. And although politically there might be a lot of, but they might come to power, and there was a big elections yesterday, and they continue to come to power. But the legacy of Periyar dead is in fact even more radical than in many ways Periyar alive, which is being seen today, that is transgressing, that is going across state boundaries. And we're very happy that it's going across even national and continental boundaries. And Periyar actually comes from, he's not a Dalit. See, Ambedkar is a Dalit. Periyar is actually a Shudra, which I talked about, which is the artisan working class. He comes from a rich family, a merchant, wealthy family, but it's actually the community, which is the Jati, is the caste, is a Bale, is actually a bangle maker, bangle seller. So that community he comes from in Tamil Nadu, and he's originally from Karnataka. And the word Periyar actually means respected elder. His real name is E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar, and we call him Tande Periyar. Tande means father, Periyar means respected elder. And along with his close friend Ambedkar, who wrote the Constitution, Baba Sahib Ambedkar wrote the Constitution. Periyar and Ambedkar are the two extraordinary individuals of the 20th century. They meet several times. They crush binaries. They crush the idea of Hindu-Muslim division. They bring in an alternative. BJP Congress, these kind of Delhi dominant North Indian kind of Hindutva, Hindu ideologies, they offer an alternative, Periyar and Ambedkar. Periyar, what was really extraordinary about him is that he was very witty, very charming. There's a story where Periyar is going, and he's in his older age, and he's already developed a very strong support across the state and the region. And as he's going, there's in India, what is really demeaning culturally is your chappal. And if you hit somebody with a chappal, I'll hit you with a chappal, it's very demeaning, because the way it's built is like the head is where the Brahmins come from, and the feet is where the shoe does, or the bottom rung comes from. And it's kind of like, which is built in the Vedas. So the feet are considered impure. And so if you see in a lot of Indian families, they bow their head to the feet. And this is something they do with a lot of leaders. Periyar never allowed that to happen because it's a very demeaning kind of thing. All his life, he questioned it. But like the chappal incident is very interesting. So he's going in an open top car where there's a lot of his followers, and somebody has put a huge ring of dirty chappals in his essentially way. And Periyar ducks and goes underneath it, and all his followers are running and taking the chappals and used chappals and like sandals, we call it chappals, sandals, and taking them away. And then Periyar goes to his place and he's speaking, and a lot of people give him gifts of different sort and appreciate him. And then Periyar is asked which gift he likes the most. And he says, the gift I like the most is actually that whole garland of dirty, used, and sandals. Why I like that is because all the gifts you guys give me, you could buy at a kind of like a store or a dollar shop that you guys bought at. But the sandals, the used sandals that guy made a garland of, he took so much extensive work to find and put that together that he really obviously he really holds my ideas in some esteem, high or low, obviously low, but he respects it enough to take so much attention to do that. So that is something that I will treasure. So in a way, he was a very witty man. He was a very even his radical ideas he brings to a lot of wit. So I know that a lot of people here are free thinkers and are agnostics, atheists. And this is where Periyar becomes very important, because Periyar's ideological consistency and his talk about God and questioning the supernatural is a radical thought in the Indian subcontinent. In the Indian subcontinent, you're talking about God believing, God fearing, religion obsessed, and in the name of, even though constitutionally we're secular, it's like, how can you be more religiously inclusive is called secularism from the kind of mainstream liberal idea, including all religions into secularism. We all know that the definition of secularism is actually being distant from religion, but that is the exact opposite of the way Indian system works in many ways. So Periyar says, and his famous saying of Periyar, which makes him so controversial today because of the way the political system is, he says, he who has invented God is a fool. He who propagates God is a scoundrel. He who worships God is a barbarian. So he challenges the power structure in terms of God, like many others do. And his as an atheist, I know we were talking to Margaret and I, we were all speaking before this started, and Periyar has a lot of respect for, I read in an interview, how he has a lot of respect for Robert Ingersoll. And Robert Ingersoll, he says in his interview, I accepted many of Robert Ingersoll's ideas. And Robert Ingersoll, as you all know, is the 19th century, the great agnostic. And Periyar, although he was an atheist, he valued that agnostic idea and a lot of Robert Ingersoll. And he was very close comrades, friends with a lot of agnostics, such as Ambedkar, and he was inspired by a lot of agnostics, but his ideas were more atheistic driven. And in the Indian context, why this is so important is, as I mentioned, caste and even patriarchy, where women are that women of all castes, even Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya, who are the upper caste women, were not given access to education. Were also essentially treated like Shudras because of they weren't allowed to wear this sacred thread that the upper caste were, that Periyar actively fights against, and as a radical feminist. But the power, essentially what Periyar does, which makes him, I don't want to call him our prophet, but our ideological kind of leader, is that he fights all power structures. All the power structures are essentially interconnected. I would say maybe in the global context that I don't know, but at least in the Indian context, socioeconomic, gender, linguistic, political, cultural, regional, spiritual, all power structures are inherently connected. And he fights them all intellectually and through street fighting. Through street fighting, mass mobilization, he fights them all. Ambedkar is more of an intellectual head who writes 22 volumes, who's clearly an intellectual giant. But Periyar's is he comes to the streets and he rattles up the system. And that is the way the transformative change that he does. And there was an interesting story about Ambedkar and Periyar. Ambedkar writes the Constitution and he interacts with Periyar. And this is in about 1947, 49, 50. And then Periyar says, yes, Mr. Ambedkar, you have given an extraordinary constitution for people of all religion and all rights. But where is our rights as atheists and agnostics in this constitution? So that rationalist thinking kind of struck me, inspired me. And I know that in the American context about how maybe about 30% or so are like atheist agnostics, but this is like something that is not in any way like a solid group of people there are no policies that I have seen. Maybe I have been out of the loop for 17 years since I've been in India, but the policies are not in any way connected to the atheist agnostic kind of community ideologically in any way. But I am somebody who's a very big fan of somebody who, like Periyar and like Ambedkar, who transcends identity. Even though he's a man, he fights for gender equality. Even though he's maybe a Shudra caste, he fights for Dalit equality and all types of mobilization. Even though he might be a Kannada mother tongue, he fights for Tamil movement. I mean, he transcends identity and makes an ideological fight, which is extraordinary. He's also somebody like, I'm a fan of Bernie Sanders. And what Bernie has done in a way, I have been out of the loop in about a couple of years because the access to some of the stuff that's going on, I'm not aware. But as born into a Jewish family, he has become a role model for a lot of the Muslim world, who has been dominated by a lot of foreign policy dominance from a lot of the European and Western powers. And that is extraordinary that he can do that. And even so, in a way, that kind of rising above identity and standing for an ideology, regardless of what you're born into, is something that Periyar does in the 20th century in America, in India, and in Tamil Nadu, and in the Dravidian movement. And two people who have inspired me to read Periyar, to study Periyar, and to kind of internalize Periyar's ideas are my father, who has been an extraordinary atheist, and he's a brilliant thinker, and my professor at Yale, Barney Bates, who was a white man, but a feminist and a Tamil anthropologist and a Tamil scholar, who also gave me a lot of ideas about Periyar and taught me to view the world through his angles. So these are some of the extraordinary ideas. And one of the things Periyar does is that even though he comes from a privileged family, see, I also connect to that as somebody who comes from economically strong family. We use those abilities as much as possible, whatever financial and educational and caste privilege. I also come from a Shudra dominant caste politically in Karnataka, but it's a Shudra community. And you use all the abilities that you have unjustly gained by birth almost, to fight that power structure that you are the beneficiary of, that Periyar inspires us. So one time when I was having a conversation with my brother, and we were both in our 20s, and my brother has led extraordinary movements against the Iraq War in the US, and he's now a professor, a Marxist professor in England. And when we were discussing, we both in our 20s said, we must use our privileges to, in our own way, make the world a better place in the best of our ability. I took up socio-cultural, linguistic kind of fights with a slice of economics. My brother was a strong economics fighter, but economics was the base, and he became a Marxist thinker. So actually, interestingly, when we talk, he was like, "Yo, man, you have to read a lot more about Marx and build the economic understanding, because 20th century has had extraordinary global movements in terms of economic liberation and in so many financial kind of ways, revolutionary movements around the world." And I said, "Yeah, man, I need to study economics, but you have to understand that for thousands of years, casteism has been so debilitating that fighting the caste system with an understanding of the horrors of capitalism, which is intertwined, and patriarchy and communalism today in India, if you understand that, these kind of fights against caste system for thousands of years, they've created so many religions. You say revolutionary movements around the world in the 20th century. We're talking about religions here that are like anti-caste movements. So the anti-caste movement in India, there's no way you could build a strong, sustainable movement for change if you don't acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the caste in India. Periyar, his wife also, and his sister both get involved in the movements, struggles for equality. And when he's incarcerated, Periyar is incarcerated 80 times, 23 times in 15 years. His wife Nagamala leads the movement, and that's extraordinary. And I would always tell my wife Megha about this stuff. And we got married 2 years ago, inspired by Periyar. I'll talk about that. But like and when I was in jail for 6 days, and a lot of violations by the police, and a lot of outcry in general, that she took it by storm, and she was a very strong force. And it's very important that the family is completely involved, and my parents, my brother, and I'm really thankful that Megha also got involved. And Periyar's ideas about child rearing is also something that informs both Megha and I. Periyar actually believes that he looks at, because he's a radical feminist, he looks at, and he's a extraordinary equality-driven guy, he looks at pregnancy as an enemy, because it impedes women's liberation. Because in the Indian context, this idea of 50-50 child rearing is not mainstream. It's clearly the woman ends up taking all responsibility, and the woman is forced to take all responsibility. And so it impedes women's liberation. It also makes freedom for men go in. It makes them, according to Periyar, selfish. So it makes, and so me and Megha, since if we can't contribute completely, obviously, to being parents, and it'll compromise whatever movement we are building. We have been inspired by Periyar, who did not have children. He had one daughter, and she died in 5 months, and he never had children. And Megha and I are deciding also not to have children, because it's like, which is a very unusual step in India, because there's, as you know, a huge population, and then like if you get married, you have to have kids, and everybody gets married, so everybody has kids. So it's like Periyar has inspired us to do that, and we're taking that forward. And Tamil movement. See, in America, if you look at the diaspora essentially is Gujarat and Punjab, which is North India based, are the majority of the diaspora Indian Americans. But the strongest people who retain their language, because in India, if you actually see, even somebody who doesn't know how to read and write knows about 6 or 7 languages. A taxi driver, people working in the streets, they all know somebody selling some food in the street knows 6 or 7 languages, because it's such a 22 official languages, thousands of languages, your mother tongue, the state language, English, Hindi on top of it, a neighboring state's language, you know all those. But in America, even the most extraordinarily educated PhD scholar oftentimes only knows one language. So Periyar's Tamil identity and Tamil language identity, a lot of the students that inspired us were a lot of Tamil mother tongue people who retained their language, and we retained it. My parents did it for Kannada, which was very important. And the movement that Periyar built in the 1960s was a radical fight against Hindi dominance from the PM, Lal Bahadur Shastri, second PM, and 500 or 600 people die in Tamil Nadu in the 60s, which for the sake of preserving language rights. And what had happened is the prime minister was supposed to remove English and keep only Hindi as the official language. And once Periyar in his massive movement opposed that, and 500, 600 people die, the prime minister accepts it, keeps English, and subsequently, 1967, Periyar's political movement, which wasn't an election movement, but Periyar's political movement actually materializes. And since 1967 till 2022, the parties, the Dravidian parties, the pro-regional kind of rationalist, anti-caste, anti-patriarchy, more equality-driven politics of Tamil Nadu, these political parties continue to exist, which is the opposite of Karnataka. In Karnataka, the two dominant parties, even though we're an adjacent state, are the two Delhi parties, are the centrist parties. But in Tamil Nadu, the two political parties and multiple political parties that exist are Dravidian parties, all inspired by Periyar. And actually, interestingly, Periyar meets Gandhi. And Periyar actually, when he's a young guy, he joins the Congress party because he's inspired by Gandhi. But in 1919 and 1925, he's completely mesmerized by Gandhi. But what happens is in 1925, there is in Viacom, there's a street where Dalits are not allowed to go. Dalits, as you know, are the untouchables. Dalit means broken people. And that's a Marathi word, which is like kind of an empowering term, but it's the untouchables are not allowed to go in that street. Periyar allows them and fights for them and leads them with them to go to that street in front of the temple, which is the Viacom temple entry. Now, what happens is Gandhi and the Congress Party, and Periyar used to be in the Congress Party, Gandhi opposes it. Gandhi opposes it and says, no, Dalits should not be allowed, because Gandhi is essentially a status quo caste Hindu leader who continues the existing power dynamic in the name of religious inclusivity. But Periyar fights that. Once Periyar realizes that Gandhi is not for the Dalits to go in, he completely comes out of the Congress Party. He joins the Justice Party in Tamil Nadu, and all his life he opposes Gandhi, and all Gandhi's life, because Periyar lives much longer, he's antagonistic towards Gandhi, who is completely Brahminical. And in 1927, if I'm correct, even Periyar's nonviolence is extraordinary nonviolence. Gandhi doesn't have a patent over nonviolence. Periyar's nonviolence is more radical nonviolence, is more mobilization, is even extraordinary nonviolence. And in fact, he meets Gandhi in 1927 in Bangalore, which is my home city, and they have an interesting interaction. And when Gandhi, who's a huge celebrity, international celebrity, who is the Mahatma, which Periyar clearly finds absurd as a rational thinker. What is this Mahatma? Then once Gandhi is killed in 1948 by Brahminical forces, Periyar weeps. He weeps and he says, my strongest opposition is now killed. We want to defeat you in the battleground of ideas, and violence is used to kill him. So he weeps, but all his life, Ambedkar and Periyar completely opposed the Indian National Congress, the Gandhi model, the Nehru model, and they build an alternative model. That is the model we need today, the Periyarite model. And I talked about the revolutionary feminists, and actually revolutionary feminists thinking of Periyar, and a lot of it, he creates this kind of self-respect marriage. The marriages in India are like, if you actually, there's a Brahmin priest who says to the woman, actually in Sanskrit, he says, the woman, the bride, must first be given to all the gods and then given to the priest, and then she goes to the husband in some kind of donation, commodifying way. He also says in Sanskrit so many things about how if the husband says the moon is the sun, the bride or the woman should blindly accept that because he is the husband. So these kind of completely misogynistic ideas and patriarchal ideas are inbuilt within the marriage practices in India, and he builds a self-respect marriage, which Megha and I incorporated 2 years ago in our marriage. We got married in the court. We had no religious anything. We had no religious markers of any sort, and we got married in a special marriage act. Special marriage act means there's Hindu marriage act, there's Muslim marriage act, there's Christian marriage act, and there's special marriage act. Special marriage act allows us to be non-religious, non-identifying, which the extraordinary thing about Periyar is, like, he teaches us that just like people of all religions and all faiths have the rights under the Indian Constitution, we also, who belong to no religion, who espouse no God, either 33 or a single God, we have equal rights in the Indian Constitution, which is definitely something that we hold true. And in fact, India, why has India produced so many religions? Because the Brahmanism, which is the Hindu caste system, which is the kind of basis of the Hindu religion for the past 3,500 years, is so seeped in inequality that any extraordinary radical thinker who fights that for equality develops his or her own religion. So you're talking about Buddha, which is Buddhism, Mahavira, which is Jainism, Guru Nanak, which is Sikhism, Basavarna, which is Lingaitism, and even Periyar's idea, self-respect movement, in the future can be an extraordinary religion in of itself, which is recognized by the Indian government. Which is, what is a religion but an ideology with an army? And what is an army? it could be scriptures, it could be a founder, it could be people strength, it could be anything that it could be governments, it could be nations, but it's just an army. So Periyar's ideas also, if it even atheism, even anti-establishment, even equality-driven ideas that Periyar is can be argued that it itself is a religion. And Periyar actually comes out of jail. He goes to jail 80 times. He comes out of jail. He keeps fighting. And this time, even though I was in jail and I've always fought for workers' rights, for women's rights, for farmers' rights, for language rights, the people who stood with me, who fought at the police station, who came to when I came out, who led movements were the Dalit activists. So I have a lot of respect for the Dalit movements in India and Karnataka, and these are the ones who are who can change the political outlook of society and create massive change. And in Karnataka, Dalit means blue. And blue means, what is blue? Why did they take a blue color? Is because the sky is blue and everyone underneath the sky is equal. And that ideology, so in Periyar takes a black, and black is a symbol of atheism and anti-religiosity. So this blue and black combination is something that we definitely need. And finally, before I'm finishing up, there's triggering points as a question. I mean, sometimes in cinematically, people always say there's one single triggering point that makes you kind of fight against the system. And Periyar's triggering point, they say he's a young guy, he's a flamboyant young guy, and he goes to Varanasi, which is the bedrock of Brahmanism, which is Kashi, which is a North Indian city, and he's very hungry. And he's so hungry that he is he sees in a place that says only Brahmins are allowed, and Brahmins are allowed to eat. And he goes there, they don't allow him, so he actually wears a Janavara, which is the sacred thread, and he pretends to be a Brahmin and get it. But the guy at the door looks at him and is like, "You have too big of a mustache, you're not a Brahmin," and he kicks him out. So he goes hungry. So because of that, he ends up having this triggering point that ends up it's not one, obviously, but it ends up creating this anti-caste feeling in him, and he mobilizes it. For me personally, if I have to say a certain triggering point, I was 14 years old. I was going to a Catholic high school in Chicago. I was a freshman, and it was 1998. And then I had a math teacher the math teacher was it was a kind of accelerated math class, and he was very political, very right-wing thinking. And I remember at that time, 1998, the Indian there was a kind of jingoistic kind of central government party which set off nuclear bomb testing, Pokhran testing. And that math teacher, Mr. Glennon,